Hey folks, Steve here with another Dark Valley video. We're going to try to get through turn 7 today. That's all we'll be able to get through, I think. As usual, I'm pressed for game time, and so getting some videos out tends to be a time commitment challenge. I'm also pretty tired after a long day today, so I'm not going to be super snappy. But if this is my leisure time, maybe I'll relax and get through it. It's tough to go from one stressful work thing to a stressful fun thing, but we'll get into it here. Now, with turn 7 being a full-on, what is it, snow turn, we're going to have some concerns for that weather. Now, I was trying to look at some of the charts that come with the game, try to find, like, okay, is there simply a weather chart, like a consolidated weather chart? And I can't seem to find it. I'm trying to find, if there's anything else here. I'm looking at the terrain effects chart, realizing I maybe should have been using road movement cost during the fair mixed and mud weather turns, but oh well. The special rules reminder, they have some special rules around the first winter. Don't let my accent get with you. The first winter. But it's unclear to me what are the other constraints of the snow turns. And I'm seemingly finding that maybe there's not really any other impacts on those weather turns other than the logistics chit on air supply. But I don't know. Maybe I need to run through the materials again, because there's a couple of things that we need to watch out for in this turn that are going to be different. So first, we're going to have our first set of German withdrawals. So there are going to be some units that need to leave the game this turn. We need to remove the 1st Cavalry Division and 2 of our air units with air bases. I'll have to think through what I want to do about that. I can probably pick out 1 or 2 that make sense. We're also going to have some special rule things here. German air units are automatically done after any action, so our air power as the axis is dramatically reduced. German units not in or adjacent to friendly supplied towns and cities are out of supply for combat, which, I mean, at this point, that feels like a nightmare, because that's basically going to mean most attacks that we're going to be conducting are going to be out of supply for combat, meaning a -2 to the die roll. That's going to make it very hard to take some of these places that we need to grab for our victory. We also are going to have to use as the axis the combat results table B. That might be a hard thing for me to remember to do, but there is a different combat chart. Looking at it, it looks like it's just a worse table, honestly. Yeah, it's just the worst table. But both sides will be using it this turn. And then supplied Soviet shock armies are doubled on attack. Right now there's 1 out on the map. There will be another one coming in as reinforcements, as we'll see shortly. So really, this sort of piles on for these last 2 turns of what would be the Barbarossa scenario. Things are just getting very, very tough. And it's going to be, difficult for us to work through all the fun there. Now, as I look at, or I guess attempt to find, my sequence of play chart that is buried amongst everything that I'm looking at the moment. There we go. We're going to have to go through this. So the Axis reinforcement phase is going to take place, but this is where I believe we have to make our withdrawals. Yeah, so we're going to make our withdrawals. As the Axis, we got to go find those units. So firstly, we need to figure out what air units, I guess, we want to pull out. That might be the easier or the harder thing to deal with. We do have to do that no matter what. I think what I'm going to end up doing is withdrawing the air from the north sector, because I haven't been using it quite as much. It just might be the better move here. Okay, so I'll show you which ones I'm talking about. So that air, while useful, I'm not sure will be the most useful. Out of all the air that's left, maybe that one will be least useful. So I might pull that one, and then we just need to pull one more, and I think I'm going to do... Some of these are kind of doubled up, so what maybe I'll just do is I'll pull this one, or wait, that's a supply marker, derp. Oh man, it's tough. Oh, it's tough. I think I'm going to take... Oh man, I think I'm going to take this one off, and I'll take the one all the way up there in the north. Now, as I do that, just to show some of the strategic situation, down in the south we've got goodness to come, but without as much air and with a lot of our combat ability taken away, this could be a very big problem for us. And I'm really surprised there aren't more general rules about winter, but apparently this first winter in 41 is really important. The rest of the winters must not matter quite as much, I guess. So I'm going to have to go digging and find where the German 1st Cavalry is, because I don't remember where it is or where I put it. So I'm going to take myself off camera. I'm going to go find it and pull it off, and then we'll come back. Okay, I did find it. It was up with Army Group Center up and around here. So I've pulled him out. And the Germans did get some reinforcements. They got 124 unit, which I put over here just to kind of help screen the railroads around here and to apply more pressure. We can send a Voronezh eventually. Voronezh, whatever. Okay, so then the Axis doesn't get any replacements this turn. I don't believe, if I double check the schedule for that. Yeah, and we're going to get some stuff as the Axis on turn 11, but until then, we are just pulling stuff out. And in fact, next turn, we're going to have to pull out a German armor HQ, which is not good for the progress that we really need to be making here. Not good at all. So we have to kind of pre-plan that, right? Where does it make sense to pull a HQ unit? I think we may just need to take one out of Army Group Center because I think the next phase of the campaign is going to be all about the southern sector as we try to reach and take some of the victory cities in the south and maybe try to go for an oil automatic victory. At this point, I've pretty much written off the ability of the Axis to eliminate the defenders and take Moscow up in the Army Group Center theater. I don't think I'm going to do it this turn. I need to do it this turn or next turn. Or I think it's this turn for Moscow because it's about taking control of like Kiev and Moscow in 41. Well, this is the last turn of 41, I believe. Yeah, so If we don't take Moscow this turn, then our chance for automatic victory is gone. We're not going to take Moscow, right? That's not going to happen. So what we'll need to do is start pre-planning our next major moves, and I think again that is really going to become a more important facet in the south. So we don't want to take the HQ from the south. We don't want to take the HQ from the north because we have a decent opportunity potentially to be taking Leningrad, which would be good, and we could sort of start making progress over that direction. But the south is where there's going to be importance, so that's where we need to think through our advance most clearly. Okay, so then going to the Soviets now, I started unbagging my Soviet reinforcements. Here is the stack coming for the Soviets. That's a nice, pretty stack, lots of units. But honestly, when it comes time for spring, oh boy, there's a whole mess of Soviets to come on turn 10. I don't have all the Axis turn 10 stuff out yet. I only have the Axis up to turn 9, but that's a scary amount of Soviets. Obviously, they're going to need them to form a new coherent line, because right now there really isn't a Soviet line except around Moscow or in that region. So they're going to have to make use of that. So I'm going to grab those units, I'm going to plop them down. And then keep in mind that the Soviets also always have Lend-Lease, and I think there might have been, maybe in the last video or something like that, I forgot to talk about the replacement points that the Soviets got, but I did place the units for them. So we're going to have these reinforcing units for turn 7, and then we're going to have the replacement points, and I think that I'm still getting 20, but let me double check that. So we're going to get 5 for Leningrad, 5 for Moscow, 5 for Stalingrad, 5 for Engels. So that's 20, and then okay, so next turn, on turn 8, we start to get some Lend-Lease, but for now we don't. And we don't get our off-map factories yet. So just the 20 replacement points. At some point along the way, we're going to have to decide, do we build up a bunch of rifle divisions instead of just rifle armies? Because the armies are great. It's just that, you know, they are expensive big units that sit in a hex, where sometimes, in some cases, you want those weaker units to just kind of sit there and hold space for you so that the armies don't get more easily encircled. But I don't know. I'm not sure what the strategy behind replacements there is. And we've got such a, just to show you, just a huge dead pile over here in the glare of my light. A lot of dead Soviets. I don't know what to tell you. But okay, so let's get the Soviet reinforcements on camera here. Okay, let me just fighting with the camera. There we go. Okay, so here are the reinforcements. We get 2 assault armies that, again, are going to be extra powerful this turn due to the winter, though the reality is they are probably not going to be very useful in terms of where they go this turn, just because it's like we got to get them, we got to put them in a city, then they got to get somewhere, and then they can attack. So they sort of have some limited ability to get to where the enemy is, but I don't know. There's a couple of places we could put them, and it would be useful. Maybe plop one in Stalino and start beating back the German spearhead in the south. That might be worthwhile. We do get 4 brand new armies, and we get 2 that start in the dead pile. I'm just going to point out right away, we're going to spend 10 of our replacement points to build these guys, so they just go instantly in with the rest. We're going to get another cavalry mobile corps there that will get placed. They're guard units, but based on what Ted Racer told me in a message or on a comment somewhere, those guys just come in as reinforcements. And then we have a guard corps, which will simply get rid of some of the dead rifle corps in the dead pile and place that guy. So we still have 10 more points of replacements, and I guess, I mean, it's like the debate here. What would I want to build? And armies seems like a smart decision, but there's that flexibility I think I maybe would rather have, where we get some smaller units that can be kind of shuffled around a little bit better. Yeah, we may need them to form better lines, is I think our problem. But some of these guys are also going to start pretty far back, and that's the other problem. So, tough. So let maybe split the difference, right? Let's rebuild an army, and that leaves us with 5, and then I have no idea if this is smart. So someone's going to tell me this is really dumb to do, and they may be right. But we don't have much of a line, so I'd like to be able to. Okay. You know what? I'm going to do an army. We'll do another army. And then someone like Ted can tell me after the fact if there's any point in rebuilding the rifle divisions that are incredibly, incredibly weak. I think there's an argument to be made that you could do it and that they're useful, but I'm not sure what that really is. I'm just not sure. So, and then I'm just off camera here. I'm going to take 3 rifle divisions out of the dead pile. I'm going to put them off separately on the table to show they're out of the game. And that's everything that the Soviets are going to get this turn back onto the map. So plenty of armies. The tricky bit with the armies and stacking may mean that they're going to have to come in some farther away. So we'll have to mess about with that. But okay, so I'm going to place these guys, and then we will go to the airbase segment phase. So we'll be right back. A couple of things I just want to point out. I put one of the assault armies in Stalino, and then the other one I put, along with one of the armies, in my Stavka reserve. So we are going to have, as the Soviets, the Stavka chit. And my idea here is, well, because the assault units are doubled, they can become really useful shock units here to just dive in and cause some havoc with high combat factors. So I think in Stalino it's going to prove useful because we can use it as a hammer to smash on some exposed Axis units, and then the Stavka reserve, with 1 regular army and 1 assault, I can kind of put that guy anywhere if I really, really need it, and I think that'll be the purpose there, that'll prove useful. Okay, and so now we're going to have the airbase segment. Now some of this has gotten a whole lot easier because we are, honestly, as I'm looking at this situation, there's not a lot of places for these air units to go that will be very different from before, but I'll make some slight adjustments. Firstly, down here, I think what we want to simply do is get this air unit in Dnipropetrovsk over here. So that way we've got a little more reach. Up north, this might be the tough thing. I'm not sure the best place for these guys to go. Now I could do something like so, and then maybe move these guys up, and then I'm sort of concentrating my air in the northern part, but they may need it more. And that's it for the air round, and now we have strategic movement. Now I got to double check our strategic movement capabilities here. These seem to change. Okay, so not turn 11 yet, so the Axis don't have anything. The naval movement isn't very valuable for them for the moment. The Soviets can move 4 combat units, or 4 combat unit steps per turn. Well, it's almost, may not be totally worth doing. But what I want to do is just right out of the gate so that we're not, well, see, it's tough. I got to look to see who has initiative. So on this turn, the Soviets have initiative. They're going to get to go. And they may want to do a movement on their first go. So what do we need? What do we really want to do with our? Well, maybe what we can do is we'll use some rail up in the north. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do it off camera. I'm going to move some of these steps out of Leningrad and get them more to the line so that there can be a little bit more action or a little bit better spread here. And then on the Soviets' first move, they'll probably do a move to get some units in a better position, I suspect. Now, sea movement, I don't think there's much to do for sea movement that's worthwhile. So that'll be the only strategic movement we make. Something I should point out since I'm talking about naval matters. Ted reminded me that once we take a port east of Odessa on the Black Sea, that's going to put an isolated port like Odessa out of supply then at that point. And that will be valuable for us to sort of eliminate that, because it's sitting, we're sitting with the VP marker underneath Odessa, but it's kind of hard to crack it open. But if we were to somehow get down to Sevastopol, or even I think Feodosia, that would count, and that would cause supply issues, because I guess the Germans are disrupting the supply flow. We'd have to make sure that ideally those German units have their own supply, but they would have a land-based supply route, and then that would cause Odessa to have an issue there. So something to keep in mind as we're going. I think I was also told, just as a correction from last time, I think I'm supposed to be at 26 victory points, and maybe I miscounted somewhere. So we're at 26, I think. But as always, I'll try to do a double check count, and someone can feel free to correct me online if I get it wrong. Because honestly, I feel like what would be valuable is to constantly have red bingo chips on every victory point hex so that it's impossible to miss, and just do that at the beginning of the game as to kind of help show it. Because yeah, sure, you can see the little red circle there, but once you've got units stacked all over the place, it becomes a little harder to manage. So I don't know, just something to help show it on the map. Okay, so I'm going to do this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take some units out of Leningrad and do the strategic 4 steps of rail movement and just sort of get things repositioned. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the activation chits for the turn. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to move the camera for you this time. Well, this turn's really going to show a big change up from previous turns. So this is a new row on the action chit availability chart. This is going to be, depending on how far we play into this scenario, this is the combat or the action chit availability for this turn and then the next 2 turns. And you can see we have our logistics chit. We have Stavka, right? We still have the Soviet Stavka marker that can put in units where they need to go as is needed. And then we have for each side a move and a combat chit. Now there's something very important about this turn that I need to show. So as we've seen in the past, here's move, combat. There's no choice. Whatever you draw, that's what you're getting, the move or the combat. In the past, the Axis has gotten the flipped chips, meaning chits. You mean when we draw it, it's a move or a combat. It's got one on each side. You get to pick, and whatever's the most beneficial for you at that moment, you will get to do. Well, here, that is not the case. So there are different chits for this. You got to make sure you use the right one. Don't confuse them. These guys now, the Axis has lost its flexibility. They must do a combat when it comes up. They must do a movement when it comes up. and that's the way it'll go. So what we'll need to determine now for the Soviets is what would they like to do with the first go. Now this is going to be a very quick turn, right? Each side's going to get to move in combat. Then there's the Stavka that can mix things up, and the logistics is going to be tossed in there somewhere. This will essentially be a very quick turn, but that's okay. I'm on limited time today anyhow, so we'll get through it. I think the Soviets are going to do a move marker. We need to do it for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to zoom out to show you what I mean. I need to come over here and try to knock out that Axis unit west of Stalina. We need to sort of reopen this line of communication. There might be one there, but gosh, it's awfully dodgy, and we're going to need to be really careful. So we need to secure that and hope for the best. We also want to be leveraging all across the line, all over the different places that we have, to try to create a more coherent and better line. Now, there's a lot of movement I could do here in the Moscow sector. I could pull some units back and create more of a straight line, but I don't know how useful that's going to be. Because I want to make sure I'm making use of the terrain as much as possible. And right now, it seems like, well, we lost some of the defensive works, but we've got plenty of forest. We don't want to give up too much forest. But maybe down in the south, we might need to pull back a little bit and maybe get behind a river. That might be the cogent thing to do over here. Not cogent. It might just be the better thing to do. Pull these units back behind the river, and then that way there's at least a little bit of a better defense factor there. But if they stay where they're at and they're forced to retreat, they'll probably end up there anyway. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. I don't know what the best option is. But a movement, I think, would just make sense, because then we can get some of these units that are sort of stuck in the cities and could be easily isolated out, forming some sort of mini line when we start moving some units up. So I think that's what we're going to try to do. I will take us off camera and conduct that movement, and I'll show how the map looks after that is done. Okay, so we conducted our movement. Nothing too crazy. I sort of helped create a more coherent line in the Leningrad sector. It's going to have to deal with a whole bunch of Axis troops, but at least they're holding. Down here around Moscow, I decided not to pull back too much. I just adjusted a couple of units, but really the idea here is to maintain, if the Germans want to get to Moscow, now they're less incentivized to, but there's if some failed attacks cause the Axis to lose steps or lose units, I could see a case where I'll use you can see we go like this and go snap, right? Come around through here, maybe come back in through here. As the Soviets, when we get more strength, this is fine. If we can maintain our position, the salients here, I think, favor the Soviets more than they favor the Axis at the moment, if I'm looking at it. There's this one Axis unit up here that could be a problem, but he's got enough issues to deal with for the moment. So I think that'll work just fine. That will work just fine. Further down south, we started moving some units around. We moved some units out of Voronezh so that I can start creating a line down here. At least the interlocking Zoks, or the sort of not quite overlapping, but slightly overlap. Yeah, I guess that is overlapping. Overlapping Zoks of some of the army units will just kind of help screen until we can form a more cohesive line, because Kharkov is kind of doomed at this point, but it might be able to survive a little bit longer. Certainly going to be done by this turn. And then in the south, like I said, I started moving units up. The assault unit in particular, we're going to probably try to crack and destroy that Axis armor right there, because right now, technically it's isolated if we drew the logistics cup, so that's going to be our opportunity to completely eliminate a panzer division. And then everything else is really just, trying to bring some units up a little bit more, especially down here. Just the Crimean Peninsula at this point is, I don't know. The number of forces stacked up here is relatively strong, but they've got to pound away through these units, and all these units need to do is play a delaying action. And the longer they delay, the better it is for the Soviets. In fact, that's probably, just as a thing to say, that's the best thing for the Soviets to do for a while, is to delay. I mean, we're so early in the game. If you look at the turn track, there's so many turns, and the Soviets are only going to get stronger each and every turn. Somebody commented on, it might have been YouTube, I can't remember, that as a new player and doing Operation Barbarossa, just knowing how many things can go wrong, and if you don't do super well, maybe the Axis won't have a game for themselves. It can be difficult. So maybe a newer player should set up a scenario like Bagration. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Bagration, or maybe even Citadel, as a way to where it's a little more, I guess, maybe more even might be a way to put it. I don't know. Having not played those scenarios separately, I can't comment on it. And as another sidebar, I'm awaiting my copy of Thunder in the East. So that's another East Front game. It is a much bigger map, but it may be lower in terms of counter density. I think, maybe, I'm not sure. So that'll be an interesting game to try to play at some point and compare to this. Though it may be a while before I can get that to the table. There's a whole thing where that game, Thunder in the East, is on sale on GMT right now, because they're basically buying the rights to keep the game published, or they bought all the stock, and they're going to publish future games in the ETO series, Frank Chadwick's ETO series. So I don't know. There's like a whole video I could go and talk about that, but I won't. We're going to focus here. So we're going to go to the Cup now, because the Soviet movement is complete. Not a dramatic move. That's going to be their only move for the turn. But at this point, I don't think they need to do much more other than be annoying to the Soviets. So we're going to go to the Cup. Even a logistics chit right now actually would probably work out all right for the Soviets. So let's see what we get. And I pull logistics. I did. I swear. I drew logistics. This is actually not good for the Axis for a couple things. This guy down here, well, this is going to be a pain in the butt. I'm going to have to go around and check supply for everybody, but this guy is isolated. Not good for the Axis. Everywhere else, I'm going to have to do some double checking on supply situations, so I will be right back after I do both. I'm not sure it matters what order, excuse me, that I do it in. Just all units, so it'll take me a few minutes. I'll go through. The Soviet supply should be pretty easy to calculate most of the time, so we'll go from there. I'll be right back. Okay, so the supply wasn't too crazy, actually. The Axis have most of their depots well placed to provide supply to their armies out in the field due to some flipped Soviet armies. This one guy who was kind of hanging out far up here is actually fine. Looking down the rest of the line, amusingly, because the Axis doesn't have Zocs around Bryansk, these units are actually still in supply because they can count out of the forest in the fields to the rail line in the east. And then down here, yes, Kharkov is isolated, and each of those stacks of units, and I need to fix up that. Each of those units surrounding Kharkov can actually count the required number of spaces to a supply depot, which is kind of surprising. I had to double check to make sure that they could, and it turns out that yes, they could. Now, just looking things over. Okay, and then down further in the south, there's an out-of-supply Soviet unit here. It wasn't quite isolated just due to troop movement of the Axis, but it would have a long way to try to get home at the moment just due to the Zocs that are in the area. Yeah, so just barely out of supply. That German Panzer unit here, due to the blocking Zocs, is isolated, and this provides the Soviets their opportunity to very proudly destroy some German tanks and yell hurrah, I suppose. And then everything else in the area is just fine. So we'll have to see what happens next. So we're going to go to the Chit Cup again. Plenty of action still left to go. Stavka is still unused. It could just be the last chit, and you know, the Soviets don't need it as an emergency valve. They can play it as the final chit, but I don't see any obvious areas where it would need to be used. We're kind of waiting for the Axis to take action. So we're going to pull the chit, and we get German move or Axis move. So I think here is the opportunity for the Germans to maybe save that Panzer unit and continue the sort of movement into the areas of concern. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take us off camera as usual, and I'm going to move. What we'll likely see happen is that these German units over here will move, so get with the line that's forming. We will probably see a little bit of movement around here, but maybe not too much. And then we'll finally get some of those units that were stacked around Tallinn headed off towards Leningrad. Now, the only thing about snow turns that's going to be a real pain in the butt is that it's going to have an effect on movement. So when we're dealing with snow in this turn, it's -2 movement points to all Axis mech and motor units, as well as -1 movement to all other Axis units. So, and no force march. So there's, the Soviets had to deal with that a little tiny bit, but they weren't making very large movements. Here the Axis are going to be pretty limited. So even those units that are up in Tallinn are going to have a heck of a time getting to where they really want to be towards Leningrad. A lot of marching in the snow to do. So I'm going to take us off camera, and then we'll come back with that, knowing that the only chits left are going to be combat-oriented chits. It will be interesting to see, where and how the two sides decide to fire off their attacks. All right, we'll be right back. One correction from my last clip, I said that Soviets are affected by weather as well here, but for the snow turn of December 41 to February 42, the Soviets actually don't take any movement point losses, but it didn't really matter. They didn't ended up. There was not a case in my move where it mattered. Now, for the Axis move, you can see things are a little congested here. What we need to do is get across the water there, and it's proving to be a major issue just because it costs extra to move across, and we just got a whole lot of logistical issues crossing the river. We've got a lot of units over the river, of course, but we're going to need we're going to need more than that, because these are considered, I think, like lake hexsides. They're not quite rivers. They're so wide that it's more like a lake hexside. So we had to be very careful about how we get units across and the movement points expended to get there. Now, we ought to be able to save that isolated unit, but that's really going to be the case if we'll have to see. Now that we've moved units there, if that unit were attacked, it could actually retreat through its buddies, so we've sort of saved them. Zaporozhye is at risk of being isolated here, so that's a potential. We might pick that up, and then just sort of everywhere else, you can see there have been some movements, some moving up, some units that are sort of progressing to meet at new points along the line. Bryansk being surrounded. I think a simple attack will probably clear it, and then we'll be able to get those units to the rest of the Soviet line. Everywhere else, there just wasn't a whole lot of movements that could be made that made a lot of sense. Up here in the north, we've just got a congestion problem up here. It's a narrow gap between Tallinn and the coast in that lake, and so getting those units put forward, there's some issues, but we got plenty of units up here that are going to be a threat. There's going to be a whole ton of units over here sort of slowed down, I think, but once the weather clears, they can maybe start swinging back down this way, and we'll have to see. It's going to be tough, but Leningrad is definitely going to be an important capture, because from there's just not a whole lot of enemy forces that are going to be able to stop them, and it'll take a while to form a new line somewhere in the swamps in the north. Okay, so that was Axis movement. So all movement for both sides is complete. Now it's just a matter of what happens with the combat. If the Axis combat chit comes up and the attacks go very well, that could be the case where the Soviets decide to do a Stavka marker play and get some of those reserve units thrown into the mix for some decent attacks. But we'll have to see. All right, pulling the next chit. And it is the Soviet combat instead. So we will have to figure out what we want to do for Soviet combat. I can tell you right now the options aren't great. You know, can we try a breakout in Odessa? Well, our attacks would be 1, 4, 5, 6. 6 combat factors. No, that's not going to work. The Romanians have a strong setup here. They're not much in danger. No use attacking down here. They'll just instantly disintegrate. But here, we can potentially have a decent combat against that isolated unit. We could even take a look at a couple other spots. I think this unit just needs to stay where it is because it's forcing the Axis to attack it. While these guys right here can attack that guy right there, I think, and that's probably going to be the play. Everywhere else, it just doesn't make sense to try and attack. I mean, granted, in Kharkov, we actually have a decent number of units. It's 13 combat factors, and we could do 3-to-1 odds over here. We could do 3-to-1 odds over here. We could do 3-to-1, 3-to-1 odds on any of the units around it. But 3-to-1 odds, -2, we could at best make someone retreat or hurt ourselves. And that... I don't know. It's going to be tough. I don't think there's much that can be done that's gonna fix this problem. Maybe we attack there. That would be the play. But I just don't know if that's what makes sense to do here. I just don't know. But elsewhere along the line, potentially. All of our units are mostly weak, but we could look at some attacks up here, maybe over here. So I'm going to take us off camera. I'm going to work through, where the attacks are going to be. We've got the northern sector, we've got the Moscow sector, we've got the, upper steppe sector, I guess, and then we've got the, I don't know if you call that the Don Basin or what, but we're going to have this whole area here to figure out. So I'll be right back with those combats complete. Okay, so with the combats, something interesting. So, and somebody pointed this out in the comments section before, and at that point, by the time they had mentioned it, we were far past that point. But something to point out is a DR star result. If a German was a defender, the German defender would take a step loss, and the Soviet must take a step loss as well. Oops, I screwed something up. Okay, now I'm reading it right. Okay, so we had an attack down here on this isolated unit. It took a step loss, but the DR star, because of the DR star, it has to take a step loss because it was a 2-step unit. I had the assault unit take the required Soviet step loss because of the special text there, because I didn't want to take it here because then we'd lose the Zok protecting this flank. So I sucked it up there. And now this unit would have to retreat 2 hexes, and he'll simply be, he'll be marked as out of supply, but he's not isolated technically anymore. And then we would have an advance, and I guess I would advance like that. Okay, just one little correction. Okay, so then from there, I did try and attack a breakout out of Kharkov, and I attacked this unit to the right because the odds were all the same, but the retreat would have opened up a line of supply potentially, and it wouldn't have been isolated anymore. But that attack failed because I rolled a 1, and so they lost an army step, which this just puts them right back in the situation they were in before. All along through here, there were a couple of combats. In fact, we leveraged that assault unit that you can see right sort of in the middle of the screen to attack, and what we were able to do was actually push back a straight up DR result, push back a German panzer unit, and you can see we were able to move up and actually straighten out our line that way. Probably wouldn't have been able to do that without the assault army, so that became very much in handy, and yeah, big deal there. And then similarly up here, there were some combats that didn't necessarily go wonderfully, some losses on both sides. But here's the real important thing. If you notice, those air units done. Air unit down here done, and those are the only air units we have because we had to pull some out, if you recall. So and we needed to do that because basically it was going to be the existing attacks that I launched would have been even better had the Axis not put their air in, and the air had to go in to reduce the losses. But in this winter turn with snow, when air is used, they're done. Of course, they're using it on defense, I guess. It doesn't really matter. But what we're doing is we're forcing the Axis to use their air because the Soviets get to attack first, and when the Axis goes to attack, they won't have their air to support them, and so the attacks will actually be reduced as well. So this is a really good turn for the Soviets, just being able to finally maybe punch the Germans in the nose just a little bit, just to show them that this war is not going to be a simple thing. And then up here, I did an attack, and it caused a Soviet army to flip. But I was attacking the unit underneath that supply marker. You can see it was an SS motorized unit. So the SS motorized unit took a step loss, but so did the army. The worst that would have happened to the supply depot is that it would have had to move back a hex, but I don't know. It looked like it was like worth maybe taking it and pushing the units back and then getting the defense of the river there that you can just barely see, but we didn't roll well enough. So all things considered, it wasn't not a bad series of attacks. Certainly not, could have been much worse, I think, overall. Okay, so now the only other normal chit left is the German combat chit. So here's the question. Does it make sense to do Stavka at the moment? Does it make sense to do Stavka? And recall what Stavka can do, right? What Stavka is going to do. Let's get to the chit. We're going to roll. We'd roll 2d6. That would be the number of steps that would leave the Stavka reserve. Very likely, we're going to get all 4 steps. They're placed as reinforcements. It may also be placed with the Stavka and/or Zhukov HQs if the HQ is currently in supply, and we've got our HQs just fine. And then after placement is complete, any of the newly placed units that are in command range may move. Any of these units that are in command range of the Stavka or Zhukov at the end of the movement may then perform combat if all normal combat requirements are met. So what that may mean is that we are going to perform a dashing maneuver of bringing in units somewhere around Moscow and then lurching them forward to maybe attack here. I need to set the camera aside for just a second so I can get in here a little bit better. In fact, I could put them in, I believe I could even put them in Kalinin, potentially, if I had to. Yeah, okay, so I'm just going to roll 2 dice. Sorry you're not on camera here for a second. I'm going to rotate the camera so you can see a little bit better. Whoops. There we go. Alright, 2 dice. And we can get 10 steps out of Stavka Reserve. Well, that's easy. And where do we want them to come out of? Well, we'll have 1 come in Kalinin. and move here. We'll have the assault unit come out of Moscow and then go 1, 2, 3 there. And I'm going to adjust the camera so you can see it a little bit better. Sorry, I'm going to make you dizzy. Okay, so the 2 units that are now... Oops. Oh gosh, you guys are going to be totally annoyed by that whole situation. Okay, so where are we at? Okay, so this unit and this unit. So the Soviet army north of the pocket that's forming at the salient there, and then the assault army south. That would give us an attack power of 19 because we're doubling the assault army. So 19 combat factors. We would be attacking 5. We've still got some Soviet air resources left. And so, well, the Germans are going to have theirs back. So let's just work this out. So if Germans use their assault marker there, so they'll actually have 7. And we flip one of our remaining air for the Soviets. So 20 to 7. We can't add more than 1 plane to the combat. So it's just going to be 2-to-1 odds. It's just going to be 2-to-1 odds. But you know, I'm going to risk it because we might actually eliminate some panzers here. So 2-to-1 odds. I rolled a 4. 4 on 2-to-1 odds. I just moved my combat results sheets all over the place. 4-to-1. I'm sorry, 2-to-1. 4. Does it both lose 1? Well, I think we'll take that. So, oops, we're losing ourselves here. I guess we'll lose this Panzer army. Panzer division, I should say. And we'll flip this army. Not bad. I mean, not bad. Okay, we've been very efficient now with the Stavka use. And finally, this is going to give us the very last chit of the turn, the Axis combat chit. Now I'm going to have to look around and figure out what combats even make sense at this point. We've got a really banged up set of Axis units that aren't going to be getting anywhere anytime soon. The plethora of Soviet armies in the general region of Moscow is just too much of a hurdle to get through. But, you know, when we get to the units around Leningrad, the Axis may have a better shot of making advancements. That's really what needs to happen from a strategic standpoint now. Army Group Center is getting banged up real bad. And we've actually, that might have been our first actually lost, totally destroyed Panzer unit right there. In the north, with Leningrad, they're making advancements. If they can collapse that whole area down, a great number of units can actually swing further down south to support. But in the south, we kind of need everything that we can get because we have so many objectives in this wide open space to deal with, right? There's a couple of objective hexes out here. We'd also like to be swinging down and finish capturing Crimea, and we'd like to be taking some units down off these military roads in the Caucasus to capture the Baku oil field. So a lot to do for the units in the south, and maybe not enough units to do it with, knowing that the center right now is starting to get banged up. So I'm going to take us off camera. We're going to figure out some combats. I think Bryansk it makes sense to do. Kharkov might even, well, I guess there's no point with Kharkov because we're going to capture Kharkov when the turn is done. Zaporozhye is probably too defended right now to actually eliminate the units there. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll be right back and I'll show the results of the combat. Alright, combats are over and, well, it didn't go all the way I would have wanted it to as the Axis. I tried a very super duper risky attack on Odessa, figuring if I managed to roll a 6, then I could force a retreat and take it. Unfortunately, I rolled a 5, which is such a bummer, and no effect. I have to keep in mind I'm using the crappier combat results table, and the Soviets are continuing to use the good one, so we couldn't make gains there. We were able to move up a bit here, entering through towards the Crimean Peninsula, so we're sort of busting that open. Over here, there just wasn't enough to do well other than eliminating those last couple of Soviet units that allowed our forces to move up towards Zaporozhye, but we could not get an attack that would have likely been provided us a isolation early in the turn for next turn. So what we'll need to do is hope the chits really go our way next turn, and we can maybe still take Zaporozhye. Basically what we're coming to is we're probably not going to get the victory points needed to continue playing the campaign game. And I know that Ted mentioned to go ahead and keep playing, but I might have an alternative plan that will work out for folks watching. Elsewhere, there were a couple of minor combats. I decided not to go and attack Bryansk just because we were going to roll too badly and it was going to not do well. I couldn't actually find any attacks that were going to be worthwhile. All of our panzer units are flipped up here. Anything I do is going to mean dead panzer units, and I want to avoid that. But in the north, we were able to make some minor attacks and start to crack open the line. Technically, these units there on the right would be isolated if we rolled the die. I believe, or not roll the die. Bah. If isolation came up next turn before they could move, they would end up being considered isolated due to the Zocs from my units. I'm pretty sure. So minimal advances by the Axis. What we need to keep going is Odessa, which we'll have another crack at, but could have problems. We also need to take Zaporozhye, and that's feasible next turn, but it might be tough going. We're about to get Kharkov, so let's go through the final bits of the turn. I'm getting the "you've been playing games too long" text messages from family, so I got to get rolling here. Let me find my sequence of play chart. Okay. So, attrition phase. So we're going to advance our depots. We'll do that very quickly. I'm going to go from south to north just very quickly. Because it's a snow, we're not going to be able to move them very far. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 1, 2... Okay, 1, 2, 3. I just rolled 4 6s in a row, for those who care. 1, 2, 3. And then up here in the north, we'll just get in there and do it. Again, not like they're going to be able to go very many places. 4, so 3, 1, 2. Not sure which hex the rail line continues down into. Okay, it's north. 3. The ones in the further north can't advance any farther because there are units nearby, so that's it. Now, German air supply segment, that's not needed. And, well, yeah, we're not going to be able to do anything about it. And then finally, our attrition segment. And so I believe that German unit that was okay, so now the German unit down here in the south is simply just marked out of supply since he is not isolated anymore. And then these units are going to be, the Kharkov units are eliminated, I believe. So there goes some cavalry, we lose a couple armies, and we're going to get a control marker. I'll just grab one from somewhere else since we know where we're at. Okay, and that gives us another victory point. Still need a couple more. We still need to get a couple more to continue playing. Two more victory hexes. That's what we need to get, and it's conceivable that we can get it in this last turn, but it's going to be tough going. Okay, so besides that, there'd be victory check. We're at 27 victory points, I think, and we'll look to start turn 8 in the next video. So thanks for watching, everybody. Sorry it's been a little slow getting more videos out. Again, we'll look to do turn 8. That would be the last turn of the Barbarossa scenario if we're playing just Barbarossa. We probably wouldn't have enough Axis victory points to win that scenario if we're playing the scenario. In terms of a campaign game, if we have 28 or fewer victory points at the end of turn 8, then we would lose the campaign game to a Soviet victory. So if we want to continue playing by the rules, we'd have to capture a couple more. We're near that, but it's going to be tough going. If we end up failing that in the campaign game, I might do something interesting to keep the game going, but to kind of mix it up a little bit, just so we can start off maybe on a better foot. We'll see. So again, thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. Have fun. Keep gaming. Do it up.